At the beginning of 2020, I had all my holiday plans fixed. The accommodation was booked, the dates were in the diary. Then cancelled. It never happened. As indeed for most of our plans for 2020, whether they were the church, for society, or our individual plans. I'm reminded of the words of the comedian Woody Allen. How do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans. Well, I don't think God laughs. That gives a picture of rather a callous, uncaring God. But I suspect God does raise a wry smile when he sees us so meticulously planning. Interesting, the Bible reading today says some thoughts on planning. Paul, in his letter to the church in Rome, speaks of the promises God makes to Abraham. Abraham is to be the father of many nations. Yet, if we read Abraham's story, we see that he has reached old age without fathering even a child, let alone many nations. His wife, Sarah, is past childbearing age, and God's plans now look a little bit doubtful. Perhaps it's time to work on plan B. Perhaps Abraham should consider Eleazar of Damascus, his chief steward, an able and capable servant, as his heir. Or should he look at the child of Hagar, the Egyptian? Yet God insists that his plan that Abraham should be the father of many nations still stands. Yet of course it raises the question, is there a divine plan? Is there some purpose to my life and to the world? My first degree is in mathematics. I taught the subject for 2 years in a comprehensive school in West London. Now, the essence of maths is to see pattern and order underlying the phenomena of the world. Now, I can't prove there's a greater purpose in the world. All I can say is it does seem to make sense to me. But at the end of the day, we all have a choice. Either there is logic and purpose to life, or there isn't. But if there is, it's rather important to find out what it's all about. Abraham is held up as a great example of faith because he trusts God's plan. Paul writes, Abraham believed in the presence of a God who gives life to the dead and calls into existence things that do not exist. In the story, Abraham and Sarah do eventually have a child, Isaac, and it's through Isaac that the whole of Israel took their descent. However, Paul gives the story a new twist. God's promise to Abraham is fulfilled in an unexpected fashion. Not in physical descent through Isaac, but through spiritual descent. The apostle concludes, these words are written not for his sake alone, but also for ours. God, Paul claims, has a much deeper plan than providing Abraham with physical descendants. His underlying purpose is to bring all nations, all peoples, all races into the one family of God. The covenant is to be open to all, not because of our merits or worthiness, but because God's love is unlimited. That shows the wonderful but really frustrating thing about God's promises. He works in a mysterious and paradoxical way. Just when we think God's promises have failed, they're suddenly fulfilled in a totally unexpected way. If we turn to the Gospel set for this Sunday, second Sunday of Lent, we meet another character who misunderstands God's plans. Peter. He has left a prosperous fishing business. He has been inspired by the teachings and actions of a young rabbi who is campaigning around Galilee. The movement is attracting increasing numbers. In the passage immediately before this, Jesus, the rabbi, has admitted that he is the Messiah. Peter is excited about this movement. Surely the time is soon coming when they will march on Jerusalem. Jesus' popularity with the crowd will sweep away the hated Roman rule. Jesus will claim the royal throne and restore God's reign of peace and righteousness in Israel. But there comes a hitch to Peter's hopes. Jesus talks of ultimate success, but he talks about undergoing first suffering, being rejected, and worse, being killed. That doesn't fit with Peter's plans. So he quietly takes Jesus aside and tries to argue with him. But before he can get out more than a few words, Jesus angrily turns on Peter. "You, Peter, you're Satan." Why? Because you're thinking not as God thinks, but as humans do. Peter has his plans. Peter has his strategy. But that's the problem. They are his, not God's. Behind Jesus' stinging attack on Peter is not a criticism of plans, of long-term planning, but it's a planning without taking God into account. So if we accept that there is a purpose, a divine plan, the question becomes not what should our plans be, but what are God's plans and how do we fit in with them? What's God's purpose for society, for the church, for me? Of course, that's not easily discovered. We need to listen to God and listen to each other. But above all, we need humility. God's plans are mysterious, surprising, counterintuitive. To save our lives, we must lose them. The first will be last, and the last will be first. If the apostles and Peter couldn't misunderstand Jesus, believe me, we can as well. But we still have to try. We still have to struggle to see what God's will is in our world, what his promises are to us. Because if we misunderstand God's purposes, even if we have the best of intentions, we'll make bad decisions. If we don't see clearly, our plans will be in vain. In the days when railways were more relaxed, a train was slowly passing through a station. One passenger looks out the window and sees a woman running alongside the train. Quick as a flash, he opens the carriage door, grasps the woman and drags her on board. "You're very lucky I grabbed you," says the passenger. "This train doesn't usually stop at this station on a Saturday." "Yes, I know," groaned the frustrated woman. "That's why I hit the ground running when I jumped off the train." Amen.